можемо починати.
Дякую. Доброго дня.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear guests who had demonstrated enough stamina to stay after these several hours of our marathon. I'm Oleksandra Tsekhanovska. I'm an analyst from the group of hybrid threats analysis in UCMC. Thank you for joining us in commemorating this 5th anniversary of the MH17 tragedy. Today we have discussed diplomatic security aspects of this tragedy, what was done in terms of investigation and as to the persecution of the guilty people. Today we will look at the fact how the death of almost 300 people had become one of the tools, one of the instruments used by Russian Federation in its propaganda campaign. Today we have Lyubov Tsybulskaya, leader of the hybrid threat analysis group of UCMC, Viktoriia Romaniuk, from deputy editor-in-chief from StopFake. We have Roman Vebranovsky, media expert, and Arkadii Babchenko, journalist by Skype. Our section is scheduled to discuss three issues. We are very much limited in time, and I will ask our speakers to stack with our schedule. So topics for discussion are as follows. What narratives were launched by Russian media during these 5 years? Whether this communication was systemic and coherent, and what was the evolution of those messages? Good afternoon, I am Lyubov Tsybulskaya. Our group of hybrid threat analysis is one of the projects of UCMC, and one of those fake projects, fake messages was around the MH17 disaster. Back in 2014, we understood that one of those of the propaganda instruments used by Russia was a narrative. And in a case with this Boeing, we understood how Russian narratives evolve with time. I won't take much your time for description. I would just show you several movies which were created together, video fragments which were created together, one of Czech teams. So immediately upon the crash, Russia had announced that it was a Ukrainian problem. Then they very skillfully turned that narratives into quite different position, and what is even more surprising, the audience keeps buying in all those stories, and started to state that Ukraine had to be blamed because Ukraine had to close the airspace over Ukraine.
Ополченцы сообщают, что им удалось сбить еще один транспортный самолет украинских военно-воздушных сил. Это произошло над городом Торез, самопровозглашенной Донецкой республики. Все произошло около 5 часов вечера по московскому времени. Над городом пролетал Ан-26. Внезапно в него врезалась ракета, раздался взрыв, самолет начал падать.
Минобороны России заявляет, что малазийский Боинг в Донбассе был сбит украинской ракетой.
Версий много. Первая. Боинг был сбит военным самолетом. Версия вторая. Самолет был уничтожен ракетой класса «Земля-воздух», выпущенной из зенитного комплекса. Версия третья. Взрыв на борту самолета.
Возможно, это была ловушка. Самолет намеренно направляли в определенные квадраты.
Малазийский Боинг сбил украинский штурмовик Су-25 ракетами воздух-воздух.
В ту минуту, когда малазийский Боинг был подбит, рядом находился украинский военный самолет.
В районе полета Боинга 777 находился самолет Су-25.
Эксперты, чьи имена пока в тайне, говорят, что ракетный комплекс «Бук» в этой истории был, но стрелял с территории, подконтрольной вооруженным силам Украины.
Эти данные лишний раз подтверждают заявление российского генштаба о вероятном попадании в самолет ракеты из комплексов, стоящих на вооружении украинской армии.
Короче, не было, скорее всего, никакого бука, никакого пуска с земли. Человек, приславший снимок, на котором видно, как МиГ-29 уничтожает пассажирский Боинг, кем бы он ни был, безусловно, профессионал.
Боинг сбили не с земли, а с воздуха, предположительно истребителем МиГ-29. Его контуры хорошо читаются при увеличении.
Вероятной целью украинской ракеты, попавшей в малазийский Боинг, мог быть самолет президента России.
На борту упавшего самолета не было никаких пассажиров. Там были только трупы разной степени свежести.
Трупы мороженое были в самолете. Набитый был трупами мороженое. То есть эта технология была изначально задумана.
Украина не закрыла над своей территорией воздушное пространство, где развязала войну. Над Украиной сбили малазийский Боинг украинской ракетой, но Киев втыкает в землю на месте авиакатастрофы чужой флаг.
Уровень нелогичности в отчете, извините, просто зашкаливает. Складывается впечатление, что вместо последовательного анализа объективных данных комиссия занималась подгоном доказательств под заранее выбранную версию.
Известно, что значительная часть доказательств опирается на публикации в соцсетях. При этом следователи никак не упомянули в своем отчете материалы российской стороны.
Выдала точно причины падения Боинга. Малазийский Боинг, сказал, он упал, потому что был тяжелее воздуха.
Також ця інформаційна операція.
Moreover, this information campaign demonstrates how Russia works with different audiences. They keep one narratives for foreign audience and different narratives for the domestic audience. Then they feed all those narratives to different genres. So to say, to those who like thrillers, for those who like suspense, etc. They are creating like a smoke curtain for turning attention aside from Russia. Thank you, Lyubov, for your analysis and description what happened in the media space. And with this, I would like to give the floor to Viktoriia Romaniuk. Dear colleagues, thank you for this event, because we have not only remember, we have keep it in mind all the time, and all the selection of fakes which we had seen a moment ago, this again emphasizes that we have to analyze carefully this propaganda. Dear colleagues, thank you for this excellent selection of fakes which contradict one another in each next statement. Looking at your presentation of fakes, I've heard one key word. In reality, there are a lot of versions. Offering a selection of different versions, Russian propaganda did not stick with one version. From the very beginning, they pursued the objective to confuse people with multiple controversial versions and confuse people, experts, and everybody as much as possible. Immediately upon the crash, Vladimir Putin said this phrase. Actually, there are a lot of versions. So this intermingling the versions, playing with the stories and fakes, allows people not to blame some definite person or persons, but to produce multiple actions. At the same time, there is discreditation of Russian side and the Russians also bring different narratives. First, they blamed Ukrainian assault plane, then they blamed Ukrainian missile, then they blamed Ukraine that Ukraine had not closed its airspace, and they also had a lot of nonsense comments by Girkin. Then they that mad story about frozen bodies which were in the plane when it crashed. Then assumptions that MH17 was not MH17, but that it was MH13, which was lost 3 months prior, and or 4 months prior, and that bodies again were not fresh, so to say, were dead for some time. So this picture of multiple versions released by Russian media, they presented that absolutely irrational approach to any accusations. When we have the official suspects established by the investigation, nevertheless, the Russian Federation continues to state that all that investigation is not true, and that they and that investigation would have no impact on Russia. In general, speaking about 5 years of Russia propaganda against Ukraine, we observe this clear approach to create informational noise, to create dirty information space, and to mix and intermingle all the possible versions and produce an absolute absurd. Thank you, Viktoriia. Thank you for your positive assessment of our work. And psychologically, frankly speaking, it was a very tough job. I forgot to mention one of Russian versions, which was not mentioned in your video when a Spanish dispatcher mentioned that he witnessed how Ukrainian plane had crashed, MH17. That's a very good example for investigative journalists why that person made that strange statement. My colleagues from StopFake clearly indicated that Ukrainian dispatcher could not be a Spanish citizen, and this launched this special search for that person. This again shows how Russia used side people for producing lie about MH17. Some time ago, there also was a version about Ukrainian pilot Vladislav Voloshin. I spoke to Vladislav Voloshin in 2015. He used to be a pilot during Ilovaisk events. There was a big interview with him in 2014 where he described that fake attack on him during MH17 events. At that time, he managed to prove that he was not present in the part of Ukraine in July 2015. This example again shows how Russian narratives work. They find convenient, politically convenient version, and then doctor all the facts in the way that they look more convincing. Excuse me, please. I will speak in Russian. Colleagues actually mentioned a lot of important moments. So I only would like to add that speaking specifically about MH17, the Russian propaganda failed at the beginning. They had no time for preparation, and that crash was totally unexpected for them. And at the very beginning, they failed to produce convincing and explanatory lie, so to say. And this again demonstrated their tactics when they bring in a huge amount of versions. Pilot Voloshin, dispatcher Carlos, Israeli installations, Mikhail Leontiev had made space pictures. All that absurd things are brought in, and the sense is lost in that. And the only version which could be correct version, it is mocked, and the audience is totally distracted from true version. What to do with that? I have very simple recipe, because I I experienced that twice when I became the object of that fake blamings and absurd blamings, absolutely. And at that time I was very much disappointed, distressed, and tried to say that it's lie, etc. But it's not possible to stop a flood with your fingers, and I believe that StopFake work is very important. It is tough work, and you need experts. But in many cases, you don't have such big resources as StopFake. You should simply ignore if you don't have experts handy. So you should not listen to Russian propaganda. This is the only one recipe. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your recipe how to oppress that. Because the question is not just who is to be blamed, but what to do. And with this, I would like to give the floor to Roman Vybranovsky. I would like to continue what was discussed before me. Actually, now we are discussing not this very story, but also many other important stories, including Nord Stream 2. The Russians, they don't try to convince. They want also to compromise the truth and put it into a situation where nobody trust the truth. Unfortunately, I don't think that your recipe not to listen to Russian propaganda would not work in the West, because the Russians use weaknesses of Western media. For example, in the past, the general paradigm in Western was better late than wrong, but now they take the approach, we'll fix it later. And we can either, in this situation, we can do only what StopFake and Bellingcat is doing. That is to publish the truth for target audience. Those media which work sufficiently with sufficient quality, they would attract attention of worthy people. And the second thing which we have to remember, that despite that huge stream of fakes which Russians produce, is that both before 2014 and now, they will try to repeat their nonsense statements. For example, Ukraine is a fake state, Ukraine is a total mess. This could be clearly seen in what they kept saying after MH17 crash. That is what they said yesterday in the mass media. and knowing that continuous statement we should clearly remember this message and build up our information policy accordingly. Thank you, Roman. Thank you for reminding us about that narrative that Ukraine is a fake state. Some people believe that it appeared in 2014, but it appeared earlier. In this or that form, Russian media and politicians started to send this message. When we in our group made research of the major narratives produced by Russia about Ukraine, in 2013 and 2014 we found that that narrative was almost equal and comparative to another fake narrative that in Ukraine we are witnessing civil war. And today, this narrative is even coming to the front line. With this, Viktoriia, I would like to come back to you. You mentioned the fake about dispatcher Carlos, who is actually a Spanish citizen. We would like to hear about your step-by-step work. I cannot recollect all the details. I can describe that fake. Almost immediately after the crash, in Twitter, we had noticed a tweet from Ukrainian dispatcher of Spanish origin who said that it was a Ukrainian missile which targeted the plane. Then on TV channel 1 in Russia was a program, a show with his participation. Then our colleagues have found out that in Ukrainian dispatch service, aviation dispatch service, no foreign citizens are allowed to work, and we found out that there were no such dispatcher in Ukrainian service, and then our Western colleagues joined us and they tried to find out who that person was. They found out that he was from Romania and he participated in kitchen show on Romanian TV. It had criminal background. Actually, it was a marginal person which had no relation neither to aviation or to Ukraine. Later on, he rejected to continue this story, and nobody could find him. So this story of such fake persons, fake characters who come from nowhere, it disappear in nowhere, is usually the main objective of such comments is not to clarify something. the major objective is to produce some dirty information, some dirty information space at some moment. What will happen later is not interesting. The most important thing is that at some moment he produced some sensations message. The main objective is to convince the audience that theories are truthful. We try to understand the systemic scale of that information and about the role played by Russian government. Now, my question to Arkadii. What is the role and responsibility of a journalist who is in the environment, rather specific environment? Let us specify the terminology. We are journalists. Those journalists which produce fake news, they should not be called journalists. This because they are doing propaganda. They are doing massive propaganda, and they're zombieing people. Actually, this is a psychological and neurological weapon. During one of my visits to Moscow in 2014, I observed how the whole nation went mad. There are, of course, people in Russian government, either Surkov or Volodin, who implement the strategy for Russian mass media. But I believe that propaganda works in slightly different way. I think the government produces strategy, while tactics is produced at the everyday level. Why MH17 story was one of the most unprepared stories, because the quality of lie, the quality of producing fake effect was rather poor. They did not produce coherent narrative. They had to produce conflicting situation. Look at Russia 24. They are masters of fake narratives. If you want to promote some specific version, and you can trace back how it appears, how it develops, and how it is forgotten. I believe that 99% of responsibility is on journalists. I agree that our observation is as follows. There are mega narratives like the West is Russophobic, Ukraine is a fake state. So the strategy is to produce mega narratives. Then ordinary journalists become reproducers of that mega narratives at lower levels. So it is important to produce a big narrative, and then journalists and ordinary people will select the news which match the narrative. By the way, when you reveal the fake and prove that there is a fake, it never covers the same amount of people. Recently in Gorodok shopping mall, unexpectedly the Nazi symbol appeared, and that video was shot, and it appeared in the in the social networks. After some hours, Gorodok made that shopping mall made statement that it was a fake, that unfortunately there was an interference into their system, and Nazi symbol was shown, but unfortunately this was not reproduced in social media. The latest presidential events considerably struck me. During the second round of elections in our newsroom, we had organized a collective monitoring of events and coverage shown by Russian mass media. It was the second day of voting. In the voting, we observed nothing except traditional level of fakes about minor violations, mistakes, Crimea and Donbass, that they were unable to vote. So at the very beginning there were no changes, but around 2 p.m. We felt silence in the information space, but after lunch, when the information about possible winner appeared, when the exit polls showed their results, we had noticed how the topic about fascists disappeared. We had seen faces of talented Ukrainian actors from Soviet times. There was about contribution of Ukraine to the Second World War, and we observed clearly how those narratives, which yesterday were very actively shown and promoted, they had disappeared from the information space.
Ми шукаємо аргументи. Але насправді
when we are discussing narratives, we take them seriously. But this example had shown me how those narratives are created. So by the end of the day, we have observed a joyful discussions at show discussions of famous actors, singers who started to be ready to go to Ukraine in a trip. And by the end of the day, a narrative about Ukraine is about Russophobic, etc. We started, we have seen again friendly Ukraine on Russian TV. analyzing a lot of information, but it is very impressive when you see how artificially the situation could be changed. This sharp change of rhetoric can result in a lot of questions, and maybe you have questions. Please, Andrei Myhal, you answered something, but what we have to do, whether we have some plans how to respond, whether Ukrainian crisis media said has any recipe. What institutional capacity do we have? What we can offer? For example, Besmertny described how quickly the answers come, and what is the conclusion?
So what we can do? What should remember about strategic communications that Ukraine tried to deal with in 2014 and 2015, then later on everything calmed down, and we should build our own narratives. If you have this narrative, if you broadcast your narrative, your image, your brand, not just logo, but the content, if you broadcast it to the West and your people understand this, if society understands this, and naturally this brings this narrative further, then our enemies won't be able to promote their narratives that you have fascists, Nazis here, or some other bad narratives. So we need bigger role of the state. The state lacks strategic thinking. The Ministry of Information Policy should have dealt with this topic, but they failed, and they didn't use strategic communications. There was no proper coordination of messages and narratives for domestic purposes, for population. And now we hope that the new power will think about it and will deal with it. And as Bogdan in his interview said, we do things intuitively depending on the situation. And it is wrong when you have such a neighbor as Russia. You should have proactive plan of action and plan of communication. And we understand that civil society is ready to get involved in the Ukrainian Prisma. They have the draft concept to popularize Ukraine, and civil society is able to get united. And we also need the activity of the state. They should really care about it. So this is a global project. It is difficult to just work on the operative level, because they have our enemies, they have global program, global project, and we should understand this, and we should have plans for months and years. And Arkadii wants to add something. Please be brief, because Ukrainian Prism wants to present their material. I would like to say that we are living in the 21st century. We are not kids, and I agree with Raman. It is impossible to counteract this propaganda. This is a short distance, and we should have quality journalism, and we should have media hygiene in the country. And StopFake and Bellingcat Insider, these are outlets that are trusted, and we should have quality sources. And you should not be useful idiot. You should not spread fakes. We should check information first. about the state, what they should do. So they should understand the main weapon of Russians, and also they should understand that freedom of speech is great and democracy is great, and they should understand that there should be proper information sovereignty of Ukraine. Based on this, we should develop the plans how to counteract, because many TV channels of Russia, they provide information and through they really have great influence through the media. And also we should think about the TV channels inside Ukraine. Some of them want to hold TV bridges, some speak about friendship with Russia. So we should block such channels, because they speak about freedom of speech, but they abuse this freedom. So a lot depends on us, on society, on legislators and other bodies. So if you have a wish to ask additional questions, you will be able to do it off records. Now we will have the next briefing, and during the last part of our marathon, we had Lyubov, Tsybulskaya, Viktoriia Romaniuk, Roman and Arkadii Babchenko. Thank you very much. Goodbye.